asked your parents about how they first met, how they got together, the stories are often different, funny, epic, maybe?
Yes.
Well, that's how our next guest describes her parents' story, and she captures the entire tale in her book. It's called Kathleen's Cariole Ride, and she is here joining us today. Her name is Margaret Calvarani. Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, Margaret, first of all, your parents came from two different worlds. Can you tell us a bit about that and how they met?
Absolutely. My mother came from a very patrician family in Portsmouth, England, which is the big port. That's where the ships went out on the Crusades and on the British Empire. 190,000 people lived there. My father was a farmer from Cookstown, Ontario, north of Toronto. Beautiful, green, fertile, 100-acre farm. Only 550 people lived there in Cookstown, but they did have lots of pigs and sheep and cows and horses.
They count too.
But if it hadn't been, well, no. Not in the census. But a horse is a very important part of their story, however. Now, they never would have met if it hadn't been for World War I.
Right.
My father joined the Navy to get some excitement in his life, to do the sporting thing and to serve his queen, his king and country. And he went over in 1917. And there was a sign outside the barracks urging men to come to Sunday school. And so he did. And the man who later became my grandfather was a Sunday school teacher. And he invited colonial servicemen home for tea. And he happened to have an eldest daughter and then twins, a boy and a girl. So my father went for tea. And nothing happened except that the younger girl wrote to my father, Jack Kell. And even long after the war was over, she kept in touch on behalf of the family. Meanwhile, my mother had a sweetheart. They intended to get married, but he was killed in the war.
Oh, really?
He was by no means the only one. Almost 900,000 English servicemen were killed in action.
Right.
So she decided she would dedicate her life to helping others. And she enrolled in the London School of Medicine for Women. But she had a nervous breakdown and came home and took a job as manager of a cafe. This was owned, her grandfather owned a chain of bakeries. Okay. And this was a bakery cafe in downtown Portsmouth. So here we have her at the age of 25. It's easy to count. She was born in 1900, so it's 1925. She's 25 years old. And she does not want to be a spinster, but prospects are bleak.
Right.
And just to rub things in, her more vivacious young sister has just married an Australian sailor who had also been invited to their house for tea and sailed off to Australia. So my mother looks through her sister's correspondence to see who she'd been writing to, and she figures out that there's this one Canadian sailor
Oh, my goodness.
who apparently is still single.
Right.
So meanwhile, what has happened to my father? Well, my father's father died, and in his will, he left my father money, but that was for an education.
Right.
So he went to the University of Toronto. He got a degree in English philosophy and history, and then he decided he would go into theology and do mission work, because like my mother, he was motivated to help other people.
Right.
So here he is. He's just signed a contract. He's finished college, finished theological school, just signed a contract to go up and evangelize the Cree, the swampy Cree, in a far northern, what they called Indian reservation
Right.
in Manitoba. But the trouble is, none of the co-eds seem particularly interested in going up there with him. And so he's kind of run out of of girls to date. When all of a sudden, what should happen? But he receives a letter, and in biblical fashion, it's like manna from heaven. So he gets to work courting my mother by letter.
Right.
And in those days, you have to realize that Toronto and Portsmouth, well, first of all, it takes 10 days to cross the ocean by steamship.
Right.
There's no such thing as telephone. Airplanes hardly exist. Even writing a letter, you know, that takes many days for maybe 3 weeks for a letter to arrive. But he starts courting her, and he's quite flirtatious. As a matter of fact, it doesn't take him long to propose. And my mother is sort of, oh my goodness, you know.
And
what a surprise.
He went back twice to England to see her
Yes,
as well.
yes,
Right.
because she says, well, I've never thought of you as anything other than a good family friend.
Oh, guys hate hearing
No.
that. Nothing worse than the friend speech.
But he managed to turn it around.
Yeah.
Now, there are a lot of other things that we wanted to get to
Yeah.
in the book. It is called Kathleen's
Not-
Cariole Ride,
not-
and it is a riveting story, so we all encourage you to check it out. And Margaret, where can people buy the book?
This is an e-book,
Okay.
a Kindle book. You read it on a little device that fits in a bag like this.
Excellent.
So I think we have that address on the website.
Amazon.com.
Okay, perfect.
It's a place to buy the book. And either you have to put in my name, Margaret Calvirani, or the name of the book, Kathleen's Cariole
Perfect.
Ride.
Well, Margaret, thank you so much for joining us
welcome.
today.
Thanks a lot, Margaret.
It was a lot of
Congratulations
fun.
on the book.